Double Indemnity is what some would describe as the pinnacle of film noir. To briefly summarize, this film depicts how an insurance salesman, Walter Neff, gets roped into a murderous scheme when he falls for the persuasive Phyllis Dietrichson, who is set on killing her husband and living off the fraudulent accidental death claim. Prompted by Mr. Dietrichson's daughter, Lola, insurance investigator Barton Keyes looks into the case and gradually begins to uncover the sinister truth. Pulp Fiction, on the other hand, depicts Vincent Vega and Jules Winfield, two hitmen with a penchant for philosophical discussions. In this ultra-hip, multi-strand crime movie, their storyline is interwoven with those of their boss, gangster Marcellus Wallace, his actress wife, Mia, struggling boxer Butch Coolidge, master fixture Winston Wolfe, and a nervous pair of armed robbers, Pumpkin and Honey Bunny. Noir characters are often defined by their witty dialogue, moral ambiguity, and their complex personalities and deep senses of cynicism. Double Indemnity is regarded as one of the hallmark noir films. Pulp Fiction is also a very popular film and was released 50 years after Double Indemnity, but is still considered noir due to its similar themes and common tropes. This film falls under the neo-noir genre because it's a more modern version of classic noir. While these films are similar in the fact that they utilize familiar noir elements, their contrasting time periods contribute to some stark differences in how they approach the symbolism and narratives present in the cinematography of the films, while both still remaining in the noir space. Double Indemnity, directed by Billy Wilder, was released during World War II, which was a time of financial hardships, war anxieties, and a shift in the ideas of conventional gender roles. The war brought many Americans feelings of paranoia due to social instability, which is reflected in the movie's themes of betrayal and morally corrupt characters such as Phyllis Dietrichson. After the Great Depression, there was mass distrust in institutions involving business or insurance. The greed-driven plot resonated with audiences of the mid-40s who were still recovering from the financial ruin caused by the Depression because it showed a side of society that would do anything to make money. The shift of traditional gender roles during the war, characterized by women taking on careers in the workforce, influenced the character of Phyllis. Her character is the epitome of a dangerous femme fatale, and this is shown through her assertiveness, wit, and manipulation. Most female characters in movies of the time were depicted as weak, but Phyllis challenged conventional ideas regarding passive femininity, which is an interesting and progressive creative choice for the character. The making of this film was slightly hindered due to the censorship and production code, more commonly referred to as the Hays Code, which implemented strict moral guidelines into movie production. There were restrictions surrounding content that had violence, crime, promiscuity, adultery, and other taboo topics, but all of those mentioned are present in Double Indemnity. Fast-forwarding 50 years, Pulp Fiction, directed by Quentin Tarantino, was released. This movie marked the rise of independent cinema in the 90s because its overwhelming success showed that independent films could achieve critical and commercial acclaim while also pushing creative boundaries. The post-Reagan era of the 90s in the US brought a more ironic and cynical cultural tone into the media, and the characters in Pulp Fiction reflect this shift away from lighthearted storytelling to a more raw and real take. Tarantino is known for his films' depictions of revenge, redemption, violence, and these all have a slightly comedic spin. Essentially, this film is an exploration of a microcosm of LA that included drugs, violence, and ethical dilemmas. The portrayal of organized crimes, hitmen, mobsters, etc. were all derived from Pulp Fiction magazines from the early 1900s, but they were modernized by Tarantino to appeal to a more contemporary audience. The utilization of tight spaces and harsh, contrasting lighting in Pulp Fiction is a classic example of how noir cinematography techniques were implemented into the film. Using smaller spaces makes the characters much more confined in the overall shots, emphasizing the characters' anxiety by putting them in a claustrophobic environment to reinforce the idea that their stress is almost suffocating. In one of the beginning scenes of Pulp Fiction, we see Jules and Vincent riding an elevator together discussing how Vincent was asked by Mr. Wallace to take Mia out on a date while he's out of town. Vincent is worried about taking her out because Jules told him that Marcellus threw a man off his balcony for giving Mia a foot rub. The fact that this conversation takes place in such a small space highlights Vincent's anxiety about looking after his boss's wife. Another example is at the very beginning of the film, in which they have shots of Pumpkin and Honey Bunny in a diner discussing their next robbery. At first, this couple seems normal. As the conversation progresses, the audience realizes that Honey Bunny's grateful gaze towards her waitress and Pumpkin's aloof presence is just a cloud, covering for their true identities as ruthless robbers. The camera cuts back and forth between the couple, making sure to stick to the 180-degree rule, and in the shots we see sunlight peeking through Venetian blinds, which is a staple of noir films. This type of lighting is typically used to create a mysterious atmosphere, but in a deeper sense, the blinds can also represent the peering into one's life. In the case of this Bonnie and Clyde-esque couple, The discussion they have about robbery tells the audience what their motives truly are before anyone else in the narrative does, ultimately adhering to one of the common noir uses of the blinds, which in this case is the uncovering of hidden motives. The light is only covering half of their faces, the half that's facing away from the people in the diner and towards the window, conveying that the people on the outside, or the audience, know who they truly are, but those on the inside, or the characters of the film, see them as a normal couple eating at a diner. Compared to Double Indemnity, the bits of symbolism conveyed through the cinematography in Pulp Fiction seems much more intentional and layered in meaning. When Pulp Fiction was released in 1994, film noir had been around for more than 50 years, as opposed to Double Indemnity, where noir as a genre was still in its infancy. As the genre slowly cemented itself, its tropes cemented themselves as well, which could have contributed to Pulp Fiction's deeply meaningful cinematography. The cinematography in Double Indemnity, however, makes the film much more apparently noir. While it may not have as much nuance and layers as that of Pulp Fiction, it really doesn't need it, and one of the main reasons for this is the color palette used in Double Indemnity.
Automobile insurance or all kinds?
All kinds. Fire, earthquake,
Neff
theft,
often
public
appears to be
liability.
boxed in by shadows and physical barriers in his environment, which foreshadows his inevitable downfall in the film. In this scene, when Neff is walking in a stairwell, we can see that the stairs are overpowering most of the shot, making it feel as though he's trapped in Phyllis's plan.
One might remember seeing me on it. I was being that careful. I could smell that honeysuckle again. Only it was even stronger now that it was night.
The classic black and white color palette used in Double Indemnity reinforces the stark and binary moral universe of classic noir. In this world, characters are either engulfed in shadow to reveal an intent, or they can be illuminated by bright light to symbolize an angelic or heroic presence. In the 40s, color in film was an extremely expensive and time-consuming effect to achieve, so all films at the time, and long before, were produced in black and white. What might seem like a limitation today was actually a symbolic advantage in this film, because the lack of color highlights the bleak and fatalistic tone of the film and of the genre. In contrast, Pulp Fiction has a very vivid color palette. Almost sickening, the bright reds, yellows, and blues saturate the scenes, making them look dreamlike and hyper-stylized. The romanticization of the settings can possibly be a method used to highlight the characters' drug use, but also their love, notably with Vincent and Mia before and after her overdose. As shown in this first clip, Mia and Vincent are in a highly saturated environment which coincides with their respective highs. Vincent had shot up heroin before driving over to Mia's home, and Mia had done a line of cocaine after Vincent entered the house, so at this point, they were both high. Hours later, after dinner, they were both presumably much more sober, but they seem to have taken a liking to each other, which could explain why the colors are still warm and vibrant at that point. Vincent goes to the bathroom to convince himself not to sleep with Mia. Meanwhile, Mia snorts Vincent's heroin, mistaking it for cocaine, and she begins bleeding from the nose and foaming at the mouth, indicating an overdose. When Vincent finds her, he rushes her to his drug dealer's house, and that's when Vincent administers an adrenaline shot to her and revives her. As they drive back to Mia's home, the colors are much cooler and less vibrant. Mia has large bags under her eyes, and Vincent is drenched in sweat, which is an intense juxtaposition from their earlier appearances as clean-cut and put together. This difference in color palette reflects a more ironic and self-aware take on violence and crime, because it contrasts sharply with the bleakness of traditional black and white noir. While classic noir films like Double Indemnity portray crime and violence as grim and consequential, Pulp Fiction presents these elements with dark humor and irony, and the cinematography of this film supports this tone by juxtaposing bright, colorful visuals with brutal violence. Double Indemnity aims to be much more grounded and realistic portrayal of how crime takes place, and Pulp Fiction sort of embraces its exaggerated depictions of harsh game crimes with satire, which creates a much less oppressive atmosphere despite its violent content. Both films exemplify the enduring influence of film noir and cinematic storytelling, with their respective cultural context shaping distinct visual styles. Double Indemnity embodies the pessimism and stylistic rigor of classic noir, while Pulp Fiction takes aspects of classic noir and reimagines them for a postmodern audience. The blend of traditional techniques with more contemporary filmmaking practices used in Pulp Fiction shows the adaptability of noir cinematography and its continued relevance in exploring themes of crime, morality, and human complexity.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Jan. Get it?